But first, have you thought mining billionaire Twiggy Forrest's ambush of an Australian government press conference by bringing in a Chinese official was bad enough? Well, what about today's revelations that this very official, before he turned up in Melbourne, was in fact one of the Chinese Communist Party's top cyber spies? As reported in the Australian newspaper today, China's Consul General in Victoria was previously the coordinator of cyber affairs at China's Foreign Ministry. And we're all well aware, aren't we, of the reach of China's cyber activities into other countries right around the world and businesses too, including here in Australia. Indeed, it's one of the many reasons why successive governments, Labor and Liberal, have opposed and continue to oppose the involvement of Chinese telco giant Huawei in the rollout of our new 5G network. Now, as someone who has known Twiggy Forrest for a number of years in opposition and government, it's hard not to admire a businessman who's created an exceptionally successful mining company from nothing, who employs many thousands of Australians and who has to date been a generous philanthropist. But being a successful businessman doesn't make you an expert on foreign policy, and it certainly doesn't make you free of the tunnel vision and self-interest that all of us, I guess, are prone to. Indeed, the more successful you are, often the more surrounded you tend to be by yes men, and more likely you are to assume that because you're a genius at making money, you're a genius at everything else, even though you're never privy to the sort of briefings that senior government leaders get about intelligence and security matters. Somehow, you business leaders, you think you know better. Well, obviously, as a nation, I give it to our business community. We have to pay our way, so we need you all to do well. But being supportive of private businesses and wanting them to succeed does not mean that everything that's good for business is good for Australia, nor is avoiding the hard truth about where this virus came from and how we stop such a pandemic again in the future, something the Prime Minister wants to see happen with a Fed income independent inquiry, but which people like Twiggy Forrest want pushed off to the never-never. Here's what he had to say on this recently.
Yeah, and I see pandemics coming out of Europe, mate. I see them coming out of Africa. This one came out of China. You might even cop one coming out of Australia one day. Look, the pandemic starts somewhere. It's how we react to them. And I really say to any leader, mucking around blaming people, taking up people's precious airtime, throwing blame, throwing criticism, and not getting on with the job of fixing it, well, you're defining yourself as a pretty crap leader.
Well, we agree on this, at least, don't we? Yes, it does matter how we react on big issues like this, but that's about all we agree on, because while Twiggy Forrest thinks a crap leader would play the blame game on this virus, I reckon it's a crap leader that didn't do everything they could to find out how COVID-19 started in the first place, how it spread so rapidly around the world, and what we must do to avoid this ever happening on this scale again. Now, I know some in business want to make this a binary debate, that any fair criticism of China by our politicians means we jeopardise the interests of our exporters, that if we want economic prosperity off the back of China, we've just got to shut up and take their money. Well, that's an ignorant view. It's an uninformed view. And to be honest, by extension, it just makes us a quarry and a farm servicing China rather than an independent and sovereign country that we say we are. Plainly, China doesn't just spend over $100 billion a year buying our mining and agricultural products because they're doing us a favour. They buy them because they're high quality and they're sold at a fair price. When he concluded a $25 billion gas deal 18 years ago, John Howard didn't have to kowtow to China to do it. Tony Abbott didn't kowtow to China to win an historic trade deal, and Scott Morrison doesn't need to kowtow to China either to keep trading with them now. For the businessman, it might all be about the dollar, but for the government leader, it can only ever be about the national interest. Sure, there will always be hiccups. Whatever we do, whatever they say, they mightn't like it, swings and roundabouts, that's the nature of global politics. All of a sudden, it could be our coal might have some sort of bogus quality control issues, or our lobsters might face phony quarantine requirements. But it isn't a reason that we give up on being a self-respecting sovereign nation. It's just a healthy reminder that for all their modern polish, the reality is that China remains a communist dictatorship. Now, I'm always careful here to distinguish between the government of China and the Chinese people. I've got neighbours, workmates and friends who are part of the million or so Chinese Australians who call this country home and have for well over a century. As Taiwan, Hong Kong and Singapore show, there's no authoritarian gene that's uniquely Chinese. Nor is there, sadly, a gene for common sense, or indeed patriotism. If there was, I'd be suggesting that some of our wealthy business types purchase both quick smart before the years of running good businesses and doing good works are overshadowed by words and behaviour that embarrasses them and their legacy.